welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be a would I repurchase video. So I'm going to talk about 10 palettes in my collection and whether or not I would repurchase them. So if you like talking about eyeshadow palettes, if you like talking about maybe some things that aren't as new, and if they're still interesting to me, then make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would love it if you stuck around. But with all that, let's just get started talking about these palettes. All right, so just a few things to note. I did see some other people kind of doing this idea. I'll have them linked down below, but the way that I like to do it is I'm going to be pulling up 10 palettes from the Tiny Decisions app. Last video, I pulled them beforehand, and I want to try it this way and just see if randomizing it's a little bit more fun for the both of us. And then the way that I'm gonna just contemplate whether or not I would repurchase these is already having them in my collection, meaning that they're in my collection now, they disappeared, my sister stole them, she took them. Would I go and repurchase that palette? Some people like to do it where if it was a new release, would they repurchase it? Is it still interesting? But I'm doing it just based off of already trying the palette, already knowing the palette, if it was good enough for me to love having it in my collection. So let's just get started. I'm gonna pull up the app here. Of course, everything that I'm wearing is listed down in the description box below if you're wondering what makeup I'm wearing, but let's just get to pulling these palettes. Now, since I already did a video previously with 10 palettes, I still have those in here, but we're just gonna have to erase them if they pop up because I now have the option to not have repeating options, if that makes any sense. And also, I do have all of my palettes that I've tried. So if something's currently in my speed review drawer, meaning like I've done a video on it, but I haven't done a ranking or a follow-up, we're gonna have to skip that palette. So hopefully none of those pop up. But let's just stop dallying and pick the first palette. So the first one's going to be Cosmic Brushes Muse. Okay, I have that one, obviously. It's not in my speed review drawer. I had to write down which one it is so I don't forget, but let's pull the next one. Glossgods New Neutrals, that's 2. ColourPop Making Mauve. So that's one that I talked about last time. I'll have that video linked down below if you are interested in seeing it. Odens Eye, Sea Talk, not spelled correctly. Chanel Tweed Cuivre. Viseart Petite Pro Volume 1, number 6. Natasha Denona Palette 02. Melt Petite Neutral Stack. I need 3 more. The Tarte little stack. Adept Amulet Light. And then the last one is Bare Mineral Neutral, which I talked about in my first video. So let's pull one more. The Nouveau palette. Okay, so let me grab those palettes and I will be back and we'll talk about whether or not I would still repurchase them. I have all the palettes in front of me, so let's just talk about them in the order that I pull them. So first one being the Cosmic Brushes Muse palette. I don't even have to think twice about this. I 100% would repurchase this palette. This palette is the palette that made me want to purchase from Cosmic Brushes. It's the one that instantly stood out to me. I actually didn't even pick it up right away. I waited quite a few restocks until the Delicious Delights came out, and then I ended up picking up both. But this is what put cosmic brushes on my radar. I do not have the Serenity palette, which everyone loves. I don't love that color story, but this is just so unique. It pushes me out of my comfort zone with like these greens in here, and the formula is just so easy to work with. It's an affordable palette, so it has that going for it. So 100%, like if this was missing from my collection, I would repurchase it. It might be like if push came to shove and I could only pick one Cosmic Brushes palette, I would probably pick this one to repurchase. That's how much I love it. I really like the looks that I did. If I have any videos on these palettes, I'll have them listed above and below. But I remember I did a look with this Softly shade and I absolutely fell in love with it. I liked both the looks that I did, or 3 looks that I did in that video. And this shade to me is just so beautiful, so unique of a shade for an eyeshadow palette. And I love the shimmers. So I definitely would be repurchasing this one. And then the next one I pulled is the Glossgods New Neutrals. So this I purchased during holiday, I think in 2022. They came out with the Smoke and Mirrors, and I ended up purchasing the Smoke and Mirrors, which was a limited edition, as well as the new neutrals in the Vintage Glam. And I did a video on all 3 of them, but this was my introduction to Glossgods. And again, I would repurchase this palette. And I say that like I have high criterias on whether or not I would repurchase this, but some of the palettes we pulled today are some of my favorite palettes. I was really surprised. I just think that the shimmer formula is outstanding. I'm kind of on like, not a low buy, but I am trying to reel back my purchases for 2024. And I'm only allowing myself one eyeshadow purchase per month. And I think that 1 month I might buy, I really want some other Glossgod eyeshadow palettes that are on my radar. The Lavender Skies. There's another like all shimmer palette that I really wanted. That's green, Dancing in the Sky, maybe something like that. So all that to tell you that being that I can only purchase 12 palettes this year, the fact that I would purchase some old palettes from Glossgods, I think speaks to how much I really like their formula. This one, I don't know, is my favorite of the 3 that I purchased, and I have 2 of the new ones, the First Gal on Mars and First Gal on Jupiter, which I have yet to do a video on. I'm really excited to be trying those out, but I think Vintage Glam might be my favorite out of the 3 that I purchased around that time. It's just the more purpley one, and some of these, like especially this shade here, is just a little bit more of a warm tone brown than I prefer. I like kind of more of a neutral cool brown. But again, like the shimmers, all of them, there's just like different textures. You would think this one would be really chunky, flaky. And yes, it is. You kind of have to be careful and really press. But on the eye, stunning. All of these stunning. It doesn't matter what you like in a shadow. You will find that Glossgods just has an extraordinary formula, and I'm really glad that I discovered them. They're based in Sweden, so they're a European brand. So if you live in the EU, it's nice to know some other European indie brands that you don't have to pay customs on, because sometimes that can get a little pricey. But let's move on to the next one. The next one that I have is the Odens Eye and the collaboration with Lauren May Beauty. This is the Sea Talk palette. I purchased 2 of the Perfect World Collection palettes, the Flora Story and this one. This is what the Sea Talk palette looks like. I don't know if I would repurchase this because, like I said, my criteria is high and I want to be cutthroat. And I'm going off the fact that it's already been in my collection. I don't know if I reach for it that much. That being said, I do love this palette, and I was trying to fold it over. That's better. I would recommend it, and I wear this a lot. I really love these two shades. I'll reach for these two shades and just do a very simple look quite often. I like that there's neutrals. I like that you kind of have more blues and then you have the two pops of color. I think Lauren did a really great job with this palette. I think in retrospect, I just don't get the money out of this palette that I want to get. I reach for other palettes a little bit more. However, if this was a new release, I still would purchase it. I still would purchase it and I still would like it. I just don't know if it like needs to be in my collection. I do still love it though, and I would still recommend it if you like these shades. I don't really use this yellow chartreusey shade as much as I should. I know this is like a huge color for a lot of people. I love this iridescent shell. It is so pretty. It's so just different in the pan. It really has like a lot of blue reflect in it. It's not as pink as it looks in the pan. And I use this one a lot as just like a very subtle shift in color. So I do like it. I don't think I'd rebuy it. Moving on to the Chanel quad, I have the Chanel Tweed Cuivre. They came out with 4 tweed little quads a while ago, and they were limited edition. Here's what the Cuivre looks like. This is such a beautiful palette. I am so glad. I picked up 3 of the 4 Tweed collections and they are so beautiful. I'm happy that I have this. However, if it went missing, I definitely just would not repurchase it, only because I'm sure this is like an arm and a leg now. It's very exclusive. And this was the one palette where I was on the fence about. Originally, I was only going to get the Brune and Rose and then the purple palette. And then I was like, well, they're limited edition. I don't want to miss out if I can't get it anymore, and I wish I had it. So I ended up throwing this one in the cart as well and getting this one. The 4th one was definitely not my color story, but that's what makes me say that I would not repurchase this. I definitely would 100% repurchase the Brune and Rose palette. Love it, love that palette. The purple one, I don't know if I need. Like, the collector in me likes having it. I would never get rid of these palettes, but the amount that I'll reach for them again just isn't worth it. Stunning to look at, happy I have it. Like the tweed pouch, Chanel just really knocked it out of the park with this collection and people went nuts for it. I wish that they didn't make it as limited edition as they did, but I'm very happy with this. It's a little, you know, you have a lot of the same browns. You have this kind of like flaky gold, which out of all of them had the most fallout, just kind of like a gold topper, but it definitely had a lot of fallout. This one's just kind of like a antique goldy green kind of color. And then these two are very, very similar. So not necessary in my collection, but I'm glad that I have it. It's hard for me to say yes or no to this one. If it like newly released, if they relaunched this collection, I probably would pick up the 4th one just to have it. How about this? If this went missing from my collection and it was not newly released, like I would not shell out double, triple the money to rebuy it. If they were to relaunch this and it went missing, I probably would, because I love the quality of these quads that Chanel came out with the Tweed collection. I think that it was their best collection yet. Not that I have a ton of Chanel, but it is my hands down favorite collection that they've ever come out with. Now next, the 5th palette that I have is the Viseart, and this is the Petite Pro Volume 1. This is one of the oldest palettes in my collection. It doesn't look that well loved because it's not. This is not my favorite palette. I do like Viseart's formula, but for some reason, it's just a little too dark for me, I think. This is really like the lightest matte, and then it's almost too light. I wish there was a little bit more of a transition shade between these. Formula is great, but out of all my Viseart palettes, this is my least favorite color story. I've actually, I've been thinking about my collection and just what I want my goals to look like for my collection. And this is one that came to mind that was kind of on the chopping block. I don't think I'm going to declutter it today, but it is one I could see myself decluttering it. So just based off that, like I definitely would not repurchase it. There's other Viseart palettes on my list that I want to buy that I would be much more happy with over this one. And then next is another old palette, because this palette was before Natasha Denona even named her 5 pans. If you've been following Natasha Denona for that long. So this is her 5-pan eyeshadow palette in the number 2. It doesn't have a name, that's it. They do have shade names, and this is kind of like a purpley mauve color story. I doubt that I would repurchase this because it's just been in my collection for so long that I don't think I'd miss it enough to repurchase it. I do like the color story, and I like it when I pull this out. The only shade I don't like is this one here. It's just very powdery and didn't work very well, but the rest of these are really nice shades. Natasha Denona had a great formula from day one. Like, I liked these. I ended up picking this up, I think, because when Natasha Denona was really starting to get hype with her makeup, I couldn't afford her $129 palettes. So I opted for like a smaller one. I remember that's why I picked this up. But it's nice. Like, I like having it for nostalgia. If it went missing though, I definitely have like other purple mauves that would fit the bill for this. And honestly, this kind of even comes close to what I have in the Star palette from Natasha Denona, because that was the one I really wanted. And I settled for this. So no, I don't think I need it. I did do about a year and a half ago, I ranked all my Natasha Denona palettes. So I'll link that video down below as well. And if I'm not mistaken, this came pretty low in that video too. So it's just not one that I remember or reach for. 4 more palettes to talk about. And the next one I have talked about a ton on my channel, so I don't think that it's going to be a surprise to anyone what my answer is. This is the Melt Petite Pro Neutral Stack. I bought this because I saw Raw Beauty Christy try this out in a video a long time ago, and it was like $25. It has just the perfect neutral tones for an everyday eyeshadow look. I love this so much. I put it in my top 5 neutral palettes. This is the only shimmer in this little 5-pan. So it just goes from a gradient of browns, neutral browns with a shimmer. So I love the size of this. I love how petite it is. I love that I can pair this with any kind of palette, and it's not a palette. Like, I find myself reaching for this because it's easy to keep on my desk with an all shimmer palette or something that maybe needs more neutrals or my singles, etc. And it just takes up like so little space compared to maybe the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. Like, that's a great palette, but I would much rather travel with this and bring some special shimmers and just pair with this if I needed to. Unfortunately, Melt doesn't make this anymore. I don't know why. It seems like it was just a blip on their website for a very short amount of time, and I just got lucky with this and picked it up at the right time, because before, when I picked this up, I wasn't picking everything up like right when it launched. I was really kind of waiting. So I'm surprised I was able to get my hands on it, and I'm surprised they discontinued it, because I think this is a great versatile neutral palette. Like, I cannot recommend this enough. This is my most reached for, just neutral, need something that just fits with everything kind of palette, and I wish they still made it. So 100% I would repurchase it. I don't know if I'd go out of my way to like find it through a third-party seller and again pay like discontinued prices, because I'm just cheap like that. But if this was newly launched on the Melt website, I would happily buy a backup, and I really do not buy backups anymore. I try to not do that because there's no way I would even get through this, but this is something that I would buy a backup of. And then the next one that I had this in a Shop My Stash not too long ago. And that is this little Tarte. This came out during holiday one year too. This is called the Live Laugh Love Dream palette, and it is kind of like the Melt Stack. They kind of took that idea. So it comes out like this. You have a very neutral brown color story. You have more of like a mauve color story, and then you kind of have like a very light tone color story. They came out with different color stories, but this is the one that I grabbed. This is actually, again, just like the stack. I like how functional this is. I just think that this is a really easy to use palette. It works really well. Is it anything special? Does it have special shades? No, but this comes in handy a lot. Great for travel, and I find myself reaching for this more than I thought I would. I think that it's kind of an underrated product. Again, don't think that they make this anymore, probably because it was like a holiday collection, but also, to be fair, you could probably pick up any kind of Tarte palette and it would have a lot of these similar tones, just not in this cool little wheelie thing that's very fun to do. So really like this, and Tarte has just like a really nice formula. I would pick this up. I would repurchase this if it came out again. Again, like caveat, I would not pay 3 times the money for this, but I would if it was like newly launched. I think I would still be interested in this and still get my money's worth out of this. Now moving on to another indie palette is the Adept Cosmetics, and this is the Minuet Light palette. This is the one and only Adept palette that I have. And so this was my introduction to the Adept formula. I don't love this, and I do want to try more Adept palettes because I'm wondering if it's just a me problem. I think that I just wish that this had more special shades. I'm interested in the Heather Austin palette because that has a little bit more special shades. I'm just for an indie palette. I don't find these shimmers to be as impactful as like the Glossgods or the Odens Eye or the Cosmic Brushes, and it's a pretty pricey palette. So I don't know. No, I wouldn't repurchase this. I do like that there are some mattes in here. Like, I don't mind when an indie palette has mattes with shimmers because I really only want to reach for one palette. I don't like reaching for multiple palettes for an eye look. It's just a lot of mess that I have to clean up. So I don't hate that it has like these neutral shades in it. It's just, this is like a good introduction to indie. I find it easy to work with, but it doesn't have the impact that an indie shadow can have. And that's what I'm going to say about that. I would like to try more just palettes from Adept and see if maybe this was like an older palette, because I think that I picked this up because it was on sale. They were discontinuing it. So maybe their formula's improved. If you have an idea, if you're really familiar with Adept's formula, let me know in the comments down below if they're just an overhyped brand and they're not worth looking into, or if maybe their formulas improve now over time. But this was just not my favorite, and I am dragging my toes trying Adept because I don't want to be disappointed further down the line and just waste a lot of money on a palette that might not work out for me. And then the 10th and final palette, we've made it through all of them, is the ABH Nouveau palette. Now, this one was the first one that ABH did in this new format. Here is what the inside looks like, if I can open it. So I quite like this palette. I would repurchase this. This is still available online now. This is my favorite ABH palette that I've tried because I'm trying to think of like what I have. I decluttered my Modern Renaissance. I decluttered my Norvina. I have the Sultry, but it's not opened. I haven't tried that one yet. I like this over the Soft Glam. So I feel pretty confident saying that this is my favorite ABH palette. I think that a lot of people liked it when it came out. I like this kind of pop of lavender here. I think that it's unique. I much prefer it over a pop of blue. I really like these mossy green tones with kind of like these terracotta pinky shades. This is right up my alley. I've pulled it into a Shop My Stash 1 or 2 times now, and every time I use it, I like it. This lily shade here is a little bit kind of deceiving in pan. It has like really pretty blue flecks in it. It's not just like a plain and mainstream shimmer, so to say. It does have like some special unique qualities to it, and I come up with really pretty looks when I use this palette. So I'm very happy with it. You can get light looks, dark looks. It's a very versatile palette, and I think that this is a really nice ABH palette if you're looking for one of them. I obviously never picked up any of the ones after this. The Rose Metals, there was the Fall Romance, and the Cosmos. None of those really interested me. If any, I would pick up the Rose Metal, but they just didn't grab me like this one did. I love the cover. I like how they rearranged their palettes. I find this to be much more aesthetically pleasing than with the brush, because the brush was not a bad brush, but I don't really love brushes in palettes. So much prefer this, and this is my favorite ABH palette, so I'm glad it got pulled so I could talk about it a little bit more and remember to pull this out. But that's all 10 palettes that I have to talk about today. I would love to know your opinions below. Do we have the same? Are there some that you disagree with? Are there some that maybe I need to reconsider, especially like the Adept one? That's really the one that's on my mind of just needing to know from people if it's worth the money, because you can't like return an indie palette. Like if I didn't like the ABH palette, I can return it back to Sephora or whatever if the formula sucks. But with Adept, like I can't really do that. And that's why I'm a little hesitant. But I would love to know your opinions down below, whether we agree or disagree. Let's just talk about it in the comments. But this is where I'm gonna leave you all. I hope you're having a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone.